spirits that control hunger, spirits that follow desire. Whoever tastes this stew, let their feet always return to me.
Oh God! Only the strong survive.
Eat once and your spirit will never leave my pot. Rachel! Curious people never end well.
Nobody in Umuachi cooked like Madam Nneka. Nobody. Her restaurant was always full. Morning, afternoon, even late at night. People came from different villages just to eat her famous rice and stew. Bus drivers stopped there daily. Workers spent their entire salaries there. Some customers even fought over the last pieces of meat. And the strange thing was, once people ate her food, they always came back. Always. Some villagers joked about it. That woman's stew contains magic. But after a while, the joke stopped being funny. Because people started changing. One man stopped eating his wife's food completely. Another woman spent her children's school fees at Madam Nneka's restaurant. Some customers became angry whenever the food finished. Others sat quietly outside the restaurant long after closing time, as if waiting for something. Still, nobody suspected Madam Nneka. Why would they? She looked cheerful, friendly, and generous. Every morning she laughed loudly with customers while serving hot plates of rice and stew. People loved her. But Rachel noticed things others ignored. Rachel worked at the restaurant, and for months she watched Madam Nneka carefully. At first, the strange things seemed small, very small. But slowly, they started adding up. First, Madam Nneka never tasted her own food. Not once. Whenever she cooked, she always called someone else to taste for salt, usually Rachel. And anytime Rachel asked why, Madam Nneka simply laughed. A good cook does not need to taste her own food. At first, Rachel believed her. But then she noticed something else. Every single night after closing, Madam Nneka locked herself inside the kitchen alone. Nobody was allowed inside. Nobody. One evening, Rachel accidentally tried opening the kitchen door after closing time. Immediately, Madam Nneka shouted from inside, "Don't open that door!" Rachel nearly jumped. She had never seen Madam Nneka angry before. The next morning, Madam Nneka acted normal again, laughing, smiling, and serving customers. But Rachel could not forget that moment. Something felt wrong, very wrong. Then one night, Rachel saw something she was never supposed to see. It was almost midnight. Most of the town was asleep. Rachel had forgotten her phone charger at the restaurant and returned quietly to get it. But as she approached the building, she froze. Madam Nneka was leaving through the back door carrying a yellow jerry can. Rachel hid immediately behind a parked motorcycle. Madam Nneka looked around carefully before walking into the darkness. Rachel frowned. Where was she going at this hour? And why was she hiding? Honestly, Rachel should have minded her business. But curiosity can be dangerous, very dangerous. So she followed her, quietly, keeping her distance. Madam Nneka walked through empty streets until she finally reached the edge of town. And then she stopped. Before a building. Rachel's heart skipped. It was the mortuary. Rachel hid behind a tree as Madam Nneka knocked softly on the back entrance. A few seconds later, a thin, nervous-looking mortuary attendant opened the door. He looked around quickly before letting her inside. Rachel stared in confusion. What was Madam Nneka doing in a mortuary at midnight? 5 minutes later, Madam Nneka came back out, still carrying the yellow jerrycan. But this time, the container was full, and as she walked past Rachel's hiding spot, Rachel noticed dark water dripping slowly from the bottom of the container. That was the night everything changed. Rachel waited until Madam Nneka disappeared down the road before stepping out slowly from behind the tree. Her heart was racing. The mortuary attendant quickly locked the back door and hurried inside again. Rachel stared at the wet footprints on the ground. Then, slowly, she looked toward the yellow jerrycan disappearing into the darkness. Something inside her stomach twisted painfully. This was wrong, terribly wrong. The next morning, the restaurant was packed as usual. Customers laughed loudly while eating plates of red stew. Some people even licked the plates clean. Meanwhile, Rachel could barely look at the food. Every time she remembered the dripping jerrycan, she felt sick. But Madam Nneka behaved normally, too normally, laughing, serving customers, smiling at everyone, as if she had not visited a mortuary at midnight. Rachel tried convincing herself she was overthinking things. Maybe the water was harmless. Maybe there was another explanation. But later that afternoon, she noticed something again. A customer walked into the restaurant breathing heavily like a man desperate for air. Before even sitting down, he shouted, "Mama Nneka, please, give me stew first before rice." The man's hands were shaking badly. Rachel watched quietly as he grabbed the food almost violently, then immediately started eating with frightening speed. Sweat covered his face. His eyes looked restless, almost empty. And when another customer accidentally touched his plate, the man exploded with anger. "Don't touch my food!" The entire restaurant became silent. Rachel froze. The man looked embarrassed immediately after shouting, but something about his eyes terrified her. It was not normal hunger. No, this was something else. That evening, Rachel could not stop thinking about the mortuary or the water or the strange customers. So after work, she decided to tell someone, Princess, her best friend. The two girls sat outside Princess's house while the evening breeze blew softly through the village. Rachel spoke quietly, very quietly, because even saying the words out loud felt dangerous. "I followed Madam Nneka last night." Princess frowned immediately. "Followed her where?" Rachel hesitated, then answered softly, "The mortuary." Princess laughed nervously. "Stop joking." But Rachel did not laugh. Slowly, she explained everything. The jerrycan, the attendant, the dirty water, the midnight ritual. Princess's smile disappeared completely. "Rachel, this thing is dangerous." Rachel nodded. "I know." For a few seconds, both girls remained silent. Then Princess leaned closer and whispered, "Maybe that is why people are addicted to the food." Rachel looked down at her trembling hands. Honestly, she was beginning to believe the same thing. But there was one problem. No evidence. Nobody would believe such a crazy story without proof, especially not against Madam Nneka. The woman was loved by the entire town. Even village elders ate at her restaurant almost every day. Then suddenly, Rachel made a decision. A terrible decision. I'm going back there tomorrow night. Princess's eyes widened instantly. Are you mad? Several nearby villagers turned to look at them. Princess lowered her voice immediately. Rachel, listen to me carefully. Forget what you saw. But Rachel shook her head stubbornly. People are eating that food every day without knowing what is inside. Princess grabbed her arm tightly. And what if she catches you? Rachel tried sounding brave, but even her own voice shook slightly. She won't. Princess stared at her for a long moment, then quietly asked, And if you are wrong? Rachel answered immediately. Then I walk away. But deep down, something already told her this story would not end peacefully. The next night, rain fell heavily once again, almost like the sky itself was warning her to stay home. But Rachel ignored it. Slowly, she approached the restaurant from behind. This time, she came prepared. Her phone battery fully charged, extra storage space cleared. She was determined to record everything, every single thing. Carefully, she crouched beneath the kitchen window and peeped inside. The giant pot was already boiling. Madam Nneka stood before it once again, wearing the same red wrapper, muttering strange incantations. Rachel quickly started recording. Her hands trembled badly as the camera captured everything. Then, Madam Nneka lifted the bowl of dirty grey water again and poured it slowly into the stew. The flames beneath the pot rose violently. Rachel nearly dropped her phone in fear. But this time, she kept recording. Every word, every movement, every chant. Then, Madam Nneka suddenly spoke louder, much louder. As this food enters their bodies, let their spirits remain tied to this pot forever. Rachel's blood ran cold. This was real. Everything was real. Then suddenly, Madam Nneka stopped speaking, stopped stirring, stopped moving completely. The kitchen became silent. Rachel's breathing became shaky. Slowly, Madam Nneka tilted her head slightly, as if listening. Rachel's heart nearly exploded. Then Madam Nneka smiled, slowly, terribly, and without turning around, she spoke softly. Rachel? Rachel froze completely. Her phone nearly slipped from her hands. Inside the kitchen, Madam Nneka laughed quietly. Curious people never end well. Rachel turned instantly and ran. Rain poured heavily as she sprinted through the darkness. Her phone shook violently in her hands. Behind her, Madam Nneka's laughter echoed faintly through the night. Rachel was almost near the main road when, suddenly, a hand grabbed her violently from behind. Rachel screamed. Her phone fell into the mud. The mortuary attendant covered her mouth tightly. You should have stayed away. Rachel struggled wildly, kicking, screaming, biting his hand. In the struggle, the man slipped on the wet ground. Rachel quickly grabbed her phone and escaped into the darkness before he could catch her again. She did not stop running until she reached home. Rachel slammed her door shut and locked it immediately. Her entire body trembled violently. Rainwater dripped from her clothes onto the floor as she struggled to catch her breath. For several seconds, she simply stood there shaking. Then slowly, she checked her phone. The video was still there. Rachel nearly cried from relief. Immediately, she sent a copy to Princess, just in case. Then she locked every window in the room before collapsing onto her bed. But sleep never came. Every small sound outside made her jump. Every passing shadow terrified her. And the worst part, she could still hear Madam Nneka's voice inside her head. Curious people never end well. Outside, the wind howled softly through the village. Rachel sat on her bed, hugging her knees tightly. Then suddenly, Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Rachel hesitated, then answered carefully. Silence. Only breathing. Slow breathing. Rachel's chest tightened immediately. Hello? Still nothing. Then finally, a soft voice whispered, Stop digging before they bury you too. The call ended instantly. Rachel stared at the screen in horror. Her hands began shaking again. At that moment, someone knocked softly on her door. Rachel froze. Another knock came, slow, gentle. Rachel? It was Madam Nneka's voice. Rachel's blood ran cold. I know you're inside. Rachel quickly covered her mouth to stop herself from breathing loudly. Outside, Madam Nneka laughed softly, then silence. Complete silence for almost 1 full minute. Rachel slowly moved toward the window and peeped outside carefully. Nobody. Madam Nneka was gone. Relieved, Rachel stepped away from the window. Then suddenly, bang! Something hit the back door violently. Rachel screamed. Another loud bang followed immediately. The entire room shook. Rachel grabbed her phone and ran toward the bedroom window. Outside, she could hear multiple footsteps moving around the house. Not just one person, several. Panicking, Rachel quickly called Princess. Princess, they are here! Princess's sleepy voice disappeared instantly. Who? Another violent bang shook the door. Wood cracked loudly. Rachel started crying. Madam Nneka, please come quickly. Then suddenly, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. Rachel's breathing became wild. Outside, the banging stopped completely. Now there was only silence. Terrible silence. Then slowly, someone started scratching the door. Rachel backed away, trembling violently. Then slowly, the bedroom window behind Rachel creaked open by itself. Rachel turned in horror. Cold wind rushed into the room. And standing outside the window was the mortuary attendant, smiling. Rachel screamed loudly and tried running toward the front door, but before she could escape, something grabbed her from the darkness. Her phone fell hard onto the floor. Princess screamed through the phone speaker, Rachel! Rachel! Then the call disconnected. Silence. The next morning, Rachel was gone. Completely gone. Her room looked abandoned. The front door hung broken open. Her phone was missing, and nobody saw her leave. The entire village became restless immediately. Some people whispered she ran away. Others believed kidnappers took her. But Princess knew the truth. Deep down, she already knew. Madam Nneka did this. That afternoon, Princess stormed into the restaurant angrily. Customers turned immediately. Madam Nneka stood behind the counter, serving food calmly, smiling as usual. Princess marched directly toward her. Where is Rachel? The restaurant became silent instantly. Madam Nneka slowly looked up, then laughed softly. How would I know? Princess slammed both hands onto the counter. You threatened her! Some customers began murmuring nervously, but Madam Nneka remained calm, too calm. Then she leaned closer and whispered softly, Be careful, Princess. Princess stepped back immediately. A cold chill moved through her body. Madam Nneka smiled again. Curious people never end well. Princess could not sleep that night. Every small sound outside frightened her. Every passing shadow made her nervous. And the worst part, Rachel's phone was still unreachable. By morning, the entire village was talking about Rachel's disappearance. Some people claimed she ran away with a man. Others said kidnappers took her during the storm. But Princess noticed something disturbing. Madam Nneka's restaurant was even more crowded than usual, as if nothing had happened. Customers laughed loudly while eating plates of steaming stew. Some even joked about Rachel disappearing. Princess felt sick. How could everybody act so normal? Then, suddenly, she remembered something. The backup video. Rachel had sent it before disappearing. Princess quickly rushed home and searched through her phone with trembling hands. Then finally, she found it. The video file. Still there. Princess stared at the screen silently. This was proof. Real proof. But exposing Madam Nneka would not be easy. Not after Rachel disappeared. Fear tightened around Princess's chest. What if they came for her next? Honestly, for one moment, Princess almost deleted the video completely. But then she remembered Rachel's terrified voice on the phone. "Princess, they're here!" Tears filled her eyes immediately. No, Rachel deserved justice. That evening, Princess secretly visited one of the village elders, Elder Okafo, an old respected man known for handling spiritual matters carefully. At first, the old man refused to listen. Young people today believe too many strange stories. But Princess insisted. Then finally, she played the video. The elder's expression changed immediately. The chanting, the corpse water, the incantations. By the end of the video, the elder looked deeply disturbed. For several seconds, he said nothing, then quietly asked, "Does anybody else know about this?" Princess shook her head. "Only me." The old man stood slowly from his chair and locked the door carefully. Then he lowered his voice. "This matter is bigger than you think." Princess's stomach tightened instantly. The elder continued. "Years ago, something similar happened in another village." Princess stared at him silently. The old man looked toward the dark window before continuing. "People became addicted to a woman's food. Families were destroyed. Men sold land just to keep eating there." Princess felt cold all over. Then Elder Okafor whispered, "Before the woman disappeared, several children went missing." Silence filled the room. Princess could barely breathe. Elder Okafor looked directly at her. "If Madam Nneka truly uses corpse water and incantations," he paused, then finished quietly, "Rachel may already be dead." Princess burst into tears immediately. That night, Elder Okafor secretly gathered other elders. The video was shown privately, and for the first time, fear spread through the village leaders. Not everybody believed it immediately. Some elders argued the video could be fake. Others defended Madam Nneka strongly. That woman feeds this community. But then, Elder Okafor revealed something shocking. 3 months earlier, his grandson became strangely addicted to Madam Nneka's stew. The boy stopped eating homemade food completely. Sometimes, he even woke up at midnight crying for the stew. And whenever he was denied, he became violent. The room became silent because suddenly, every elder remembered similar stories inside their own families. At that moment, they realized the truth. The food was doing something terrible to people. That same night, the elders made a decision. Madam Nneka's restaurant would be searched publicly the next morning. No more secrets, no more hiding. But somehow, before sunrise, Madam Nneka already knew. Because when workers arrived early the next morning, they found the restaurant completely empty. No customers, no cooking, no workers, only Madam Nneka, standing quietly beside the giant cooking pot, waiting, smiling, as if she had been expecting them all along. The news spread through Umuachi before sunrise. Village elders were going to Madam Nneka's restaurant. People rushed from different streets to follow them. Some came out of fear. Others came out of curiosity. And some simply wanted food before whatever drama was happening ruined breakfast. Princess walked beside Elder Okafor silently. Her heart pounded heavily inside her chest. Deep down, she feared they were already too late. When the crowd finally reached the restaurant, everybody slowed down. Something felt wrong immediately. Too quiet. Usually, the place smelled of stew and roasted meat by this hour. Usually, customers already filled the benches outside. But today, silence. Only silence. The restaurant doors stood wide open, and inside, Madam Nneka waited, standing beside the giant cooking pot, smiling calmly. The sight alone made several villagers uncomfortable. Even the elders stopped walking for a moment. Madam Nneka looked at the growing crowd and laughed softly. "Ah, so many visitors this morning." Nobody answered. Then Elder Okafor stepped forward. "We need to search this place." Madam Nneka tilted her head slightly, still smiling. "Search for what?" Princess suddenly stepped forward angrily. "Rachel!" The crowd began murmuring immediately. Madam Nneka slowly looked toward Princess, then sighed dramatically. "Ah, that girl again." Princess clenched her fist tightly. "Where is she?" For the first time, Madam Nneka's smile faded slightly. Only slightly. Then she answered calmly. "I already told you, I know nothing about your friend." Princess immediately raised her phone. "Then explain this." She pressed play. Instantly, Madam Nneka's incantations echoed loudly across the restaurant. The entire crowd became silent. Villagers stared at the screen in horror as the video showed the corpse water, the chanting, the ritual over the boiling stew. Then came Madam Nneka's voice. "Let their spirits remain tied to this pot forever." Several women gasped loudly. One man dropped his plate of food instantly. The crowd erupted into chaos. "Jesus Christ, what is this? Corpse water? Witch?" Some villagers began vomiting immediately after remembering how much stew they had eaten. Others started crying. Meanwhile, Madam Nneka simply stood there watching everybody calmly, almost amused. Then suddenly, one angry villager grabbed the giant cooking pot and overturned it violently. The stew spilled across the floor, and instantly, the entire restaurant filled with a terrible smell. Not stew, not spices. Death. Rotten death. People covered their noses immediately. Some screamed. Floating inside the spilled soup were strange black objects wrapped in cloth. Princess stepped backward in horror. One elder carefully used a stick to open one of them. Inside was human hair. The crowd exploded. Women screamed loudly. Men grabbed chairs and began destroying tables violently. Others rushed toward Madam Nneka angrily. But before anybody could touch her, she started laughing. Not normal laughter. Terrible laughter. Loud, wild, almost inhuman. Then she shouted, "All of you ate it!" The crowd froze instantly. Madam Nneka pointed violently at them. "You loved the food. Every single one of you." Nobody spoke. Her eyes looked completely different now. Dark, furious, mad. "Did any of you ask questions when your mouths were full?" Silence. Even the angry villagers became quiet. Because deep down, they knew she was right. Madam Nneka continued laughing. You kept coming back, again and again like hungry dogs. Then suddenly, she pointed directly at Princess. And your friend Rachel. Princess's breathing stopped immediately. Madam Nneka smiled slowly. Curious people never end well. Princess screamed, Where is she? For a brief second, something strange crossed Madam Nneka's face. Almost regret, almost sadness, but it disappeared quickly. Then she whispered softly, Some secrets should stay buried. That was enough. The villagers rushed toward her angrily. But before they could grab her, Madam Nneka suddenly threw black powder into the air. The entire restaurant filled with thick smoke instantly. People screamed and stumbled backward, coughing violently. And when the smoke finally cleared, Madam Nneka was gone. The entire restaurant fell into panic. People pushed each other trying to escape the smoke. Some villagers screamed Madam Nneka's name, others shouted prayers loudly. By the time the smoke finally cleared completely, Madam Nneka was gone. Only the giant empty pot remained, still bubbling. Princess stood frozen in the middle of the destroyed restaurant. Her chest rose heavily as tears filled her eyes. Rachel was still missing, and now Madam Nneka had escaped. Outside, angry villagers spread across the town, searching everywhere. The mortuary, the forest, abandoned buildings, even nearby villages. But Madam Nneka had vanished completely. Then suddenly, someone found the mortuary attendant trying to escape through the back road out of town. Villagers dragged him back violently. At first, the man denied everything, but after the elders threatened to hand him over to the police, he broke down crying. And finally, he confessed. Yes, he supplied the corpse water. Yes, Madam Nneka paid him every single week. And then he revealed something even worse. Rachel was still alive. Princess nearly collapsed from relief. The mortuary attendant confessed that Madam Nneka locked Rachel inside an abandoned storage building near the old forest road. Without wasting time, villagers rushed there immediately. The small building smelled damp and rotten. Its wooden door was chained from outside. Elder Okafor broke the chain himself. Then slowly, the door opened. Princess covered her mouth instantly. Rachel sat weakly on the floor inside the dark room, alive but badly traumatized. Her clothes were dirty. Her face looked pale. And the moment she saw Princess, she burst into tears immediately. Princess ran forward and hugged her tightly. Outside, villagers began shouting angrily. The entire town exploded with rage after hearing the full confession. 3 days later, Madam Nneka was found, hiding inside an abandoned hut outside a neighboring village. When villagers dragged her, she did not cry, did not beg, did not deny anything. She simply smiled quietly while people insulted her. Even Rachel could not look directly into her eyes. Then during the final judgment, Elder Okafor stood before the entire village and spoke loudly. From today onward, Madam Nneka is banished forever. The crowd shouted in agreement immediately. Madam Nneka only laughed softly. Then finally, for the first time, she spoke honestly. You call me evil now. Her eyes slowly moved across the crowd. But all of you made me rich. Silence. Nobody spoke. Because deep down, everyone knew it was true. Madam Nneka smiled one final time. Human beings will eat anything as long as it tastes good. Even the elders looked disturbed by those words. That same evening, Madam Nneka was driven out of the village completely. Her restaurant was burned down, the giant cooking pots destroyed. And for a long time, people feared eating outside food again. Slowly, life returned to normal. But Rachel never truly recovered. Sometimes she woke up screaming at night. Sometimes she claimed she could still hear Madam Nneka chanting inside her dreams. And strangely, even after learning the truth, part of her still craved the stew. That terrified her the most. Months later, travelers passing through another town began talking about a woman selling unbelievably delicious red stew beside the roadside. Customers lined up for hours. People became addicted after just one taste. Then, slowly, a familiar laugh echoed through the darkness. Madam Nneka's laugh.